Welcome to Who Are You, a CSI podcast. I am Lauren, and I've seen CSI thrown through around 3 to 4 times.
And I'm Nick, and these are my first time experiencing these episodes.
And today, we are reviewing Season 3, Episode 9, Bloodlust. Original air date, December 5th, 2002. Director is Charles Carell. Writers are Anthony E. Zeiker, Josh Bernin, and Carol Mendelsohn. And I wonder if that's a new director. And I say that, A, because I stumbled over his name, which, I stumble over people's names all the time, so that's not totally out of the blue for me. But, and we'll get into this as we dive further into the episode, this had a very different feel to it.
There's something different about it, different than from a format standpoint. Format standpoint for sure.
Yep. I feel like there's some camera moves that we've never really done before.
Yeah, I don't want to jump ahead, but
yeah, that's again, we can get to it.
I would just, one of the buzzwords I would use to describe my first time watching this episode is gripping. Like, it really held my attention.
Yeah.
So whether that's story writing or direction or acting, or most likely the culmination of all three, and also editing probably to a large extent as well. Shout out to the editors out there. Yeah, I think that's important. I think I can actually answer your question.
He directed 3 episodes of CSI.
What happened to this guy?
I know, because
first episode was Ellie in season 2. This is actually his last episode. That's when James Brass's daughter, right?
Yes.
And then You've Got Mail.
Oh, okay.
Which I'm not remembering what this although the screenshot from this episode is Nick and Catherine at the lake, and I remember making a weird reference back to the scuba diver in the tree.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if that's, I know it's mail as in
MALE.
Yeah, not. Oh, this is the one with the 2 bodies concealed in pipes at a construction site. And then the hunting accident.
Right. The hunter. Yeah. Yep, I forgot that. Yeah. So both of those were good episodes. And so it's a shame that this appears to be his last episode because, as we'll discuss later, it's on the plus side.
So we begin today's episode first with Missy Elliott, which love.
Yeah. Which I feel
I'm
like
a big fan that they're spending money on the music. I'm like, all right, CSI, you invest in that soundtrack. Like,
maybe they had a deal. I don't know when is this like when the album came out? Who knows?
But I think the album came out before this.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think it was like.
It's so hard for me to remember timelines that I never know the answer. But later on in the episode, it's heavily implied this is not just an overtrack. This is actually playing in the car.
Yes. So before we get to that stage, so we hear Missy Elliott, we see, a few different shots of the Vegas Strip. So Nick, what is our Vegas score for today's episode?
I thought we were on a rocket ship trajectory for a perfect score. Ooh. It is very fun. The first scene is 4 cuts, 9 seconds, which is long.
And we have a lot of interjectory cuts. There's a lot of cut. We don't have the hard cuts that we had last episode. We have our transition shots of Vegas and then move on to the next scene.
It falls off a cliff, sort of. The last couple interjectory shots do not feature the Vegas Strip. They're just
one is suburbs. Yeah,
they're just suburbs, and so we don't give those guys credit.
No, we don't.
We get to 48 out of 55.
I feel like that's the highest we've had in a while.
One more thing would have got us to at least 54 usually. If not to 55. So we've had a perfect before. This is probably our second highest of all time.
Yeah.
And we got there in probably the first 2/3 of the episode.
Yes.
And
it's funny because this doesn't, storyline wise, this doesn't feel very Vegas-y. Like, this isn't entrenched in Vegas, this episode.
And I thought there was gonna be a lot of filler, so I thought this would continue. I thought it was almost like a given. By the time we got to the third intercut scene, I was like, okay, we're gonna blow past this Vegas one. And then it just dries up to the point that the last one was pretty far off from the second to last one, that I was like, did I miss one? And so I had to recheck them all during my rewatch to make sure. But it's actually a total of 8 scenes for 24 seconds in total time. Okay. So almost a whole commercial's worth of Vegas scenes, which makes sense given the, this is arguably a 1 crime storyline.
Yes, it is.
They kind of play it off like a 1.5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say 1.5 is a fair assessment of it.
So it gives you a little bit more room maybe to do this. But I was actually kind of disappointed. I was like, oh man, thought we were going to perfect. And they were all, they were good shots, good pacing, no complaints.
All right, sweet. So we keep listening to Miss Elliott for a bit. It does end up being turned off, but we have a woman in a cab. She is chatting with her taxi driver, and not the taxi driver, the passenger is my Spot the guest star.
Oh.
This is going to be probably the most random, well, to date, this is definitely the most random Spot the guest star. So the first time I watched this episode, I was like, I know her, but I couldn't place it. But I was like, man, I definitely know her. And so then I watched it again.
Gina Phillips.
So I watched it again, and I was like, I definitely know her. But I was like, I got to look at our IMDb because I can't figure it out. So I'm going through her IMDb, and she's known for Jeepers Creepers, which I have seen, but I was like, that's not like really ringing it for me. So I'm like continuing to go through her IMDb. She is Melody in a not great horror movie called Dead and Breakfast that I bought when I worked at Suncoast, which was a DVD store in the mall.
Yeah.
When I was like in my late teens, early 20s. And this is just to lay the scene for you, audience. This is before streaming. So this was like, if you wanted to watch a movie, you had to have a physical copy of it on a VHS or a DVD, and you had to put it into a player, and you had to watch it that way. And I had no money because I was like late teens, early 20s. And so I probably only had like 15 DVDs. And so I watched Dead and Breakfast multiple times.
Well, probably it was like discount DVD at Suncoast at some point, right? Like bargain bin.
Yeah, I think it was a bargain bin. It was like a $5 movie or something. And
is Melody a major character in
Yes, she is. But this is how not widespread this movie is. I was like, oh, I want to try to find a picture of her from this movie to like help jog my memory.
Yep.
And I literally typed in Melody, Dead and Breakfast, and I could only find one tiny image that's like the entire cast in this one scene, and she's like in the corner. And I was like,
did you go, sometimes you go to the IMDb page, you can go through the photos there.
I mean, she does have 46 photos, so I'll do a quick little thing. I don't want to spend too much time.
Yeah. But I will, while you're doing that, I will say, scrolling through some other places that maybe we've mentioned guest star from before we've seen. This is an episode of Sliders in 1996.
Okay.
She was an episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Ooh, I might recognize her from that as well. But I definitely think Dead and Breakfast is the one, because I watched that movie, again, way too many times, because I only had like 15 DVDs.
Maybe my favorite credit is she appeared alongside teen heartthrob Mayim Bialik in Blossom for one episode.
Oh, okay.
And, I say alongside, having no idea who this character is and whether they shared a scene.
Let's see what episode of Deep Space,
but her name was she's credited as Tracy. She's also credited in an episode of Growing Pains.
Oh, okay.
So there you go.
All right, let me just go see. So there's no pictures of her in her IMDb. There's literally a picture of the front of the movie, like the movie poster.
Okay. I clicked on Dead and Breakfast and there was like one photo, and I was like, she could be any one of these people. I have no idea.
That's it. I'm not seeing her credit for Deep Space Nine. Yeah. Oh, there it goes.
It's way down.
Darius. Oh, okay. I did not recognize her from this because she was a child, but I know. Okay, that is her. Okay, that's definitely not where I recognize her. I remember her from Ben, but Spot the guest star. Sorry, that was a bit of a tangent. So
apparently, Portia de Rossi is in Dead and Breakfast.
There's some random.
She plays the bride, and Diedrich Bader, who is one of the guys from the Drew Carey Show, is in that.
There's some very random people in it.
Yeah, this is an interesting movie. Well, if we get 100 Patreon followers, Lauren and I
will review.
We'll do a special live review of Dead and Breakfast commentary for all of you out there. You can hold us to that.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. But they're the cab driver, the taxi driver, and the woman are having a conversation, and then we kind of out of the corner see a person stumbling. The passenger screams stop, but the cab driver hits the person. But they get out of the taxi, they go check. You can tell that they're that they're upset and they're frazzled, and they get back into their cab. But a group of bikers who have been watching this entire incident run over, mob mentality, pull him out and just start beating him.
I think that this scene has many great things going for it in sort of the way it's filmed and edited. First is that you can see this pedestrian crossing the street.
Mm-hmm.
And then we kind of cut to...
Yeah, you don't... I say hit him. We don't see...
Correct.
We do not actually see the taxi hit the person. We assume that happens, and we get the, like, bump, bump.
Yep. That's what we get. That's where I say, like, it's really well edited, because later in the episode, the evidence starts to allude to it wasn't a traditional hit. He was probably on the ground. This is all taking place in a split second. In a lot of ways, they don't know this, but from the way it's shot, it was a fraction of a second was the difference between whether the taxi hit this person in the normal fashion or not. But rewatching it, I was like very keen-eyed to see what this scene looked like. And I was like, okay, you did a really, really good job with cutting back and forth. But also the way the taxi driver gets in the car, he's freaking out. First, he doesn't even see, and then it's behind him. He sees the body. He runs back in the car. The guy's from across the street. You get that idea. He's jumping back in the car. Is he going to drive away? The guys across the street start running over. But when you realize that he doesn't move, they stay, right. They hold him on that taxi. It takes a while for these guys to get across the street.
Yeah.
That's super important for the rest of the storyline.
Yes.
Is that, like, he could have started driving away before those guys got there, if that was his intention.
Right.
And spoiler alert, we learn information really not that far from now that he is
not very. It's like the next few scenes.
But having that time locked in on the taxi and giving you that sort of like moment where you can start to feel like, wait, why isn't he left yet? Right before the guys get there. I think the pacing of that is like chef's kiss.
Yeah.
In terms of like the way, like as you go through the episode and then when I watch it again, like 10 out of 10. I think this is weirdly the best scene in the whole episode.
Okay. All right.
Which isn't a knock on the rest of the episode. No, I just think that it really sets up everything that's going on in the episode and it holds true, which is I think where episodes often fall down for me is
when they cheat. Yeah. Yeah.
And in here they did everything right. And I was like, somebody cared about nailing this scene. And maybe that was Charles Correll. And that's unfortunate. Who knows? For all I know, Charles Correll passed away shortly after this was filmed. Yeah,
and that's I hope not, but
well, he doesn't have many more credits.
No, he doesn't. He only has a few more credits, and then it just stops.
Yeah. Well, apparently he passed away in June of 2024, so not immediately after, but a couple years later.
Okay. All right. So we then have Grissom and Jibras on scene. We learn that Grissom was on a date. He doesn't know, but they're
never mentioned again. What a tease.
So I think, you know what? I'm going to mention this later. I do think that it's mentioned to...
All right, when we get there, let me know.
Yeah, when we get there, I'll say it. Okay. So David has... Actually, David's in a few. He has a few. He's a little bit more than he has been in the last few episodes, but he's there. He's letting Grissom know that the victim's, like, insides are on the outside. And this brings up a very serious question for Grissom as he's chatting with Jim Brass of, like, when have you ever seen this before? Like, we've worked hundreds of hit and runs. When have you ever seen their viscera on the outside? And Jim Brass is like,
it's like never, right?
Yeah, and Jim Brass is like, this is a first. And he's like, yep. Which brings us to credits. Again, no fake out, just direct.
First time for everything. That's all right.
First time for everything. And then boom to credits. We're back to the scene. The eyewitnesses, aka the bikers, are all lined up. Jim Brass and Grissom are talking to the woman from the taxi. And this is where we learn that the taxi driver was not trying to flee the scene. He was reaching for his radio to ask for help.
Yeah, that's what the woman in the back of the cab says he was doing.
Yes.
They show Grissom looking in the cab. You can see the radio on the seat.
Yeah.
Doesn't have camera out to take a photograph of it, which probably would be useful. We're just going to assume that happens later.
Let's hope that we're thorough here.
But they also, like, they've moved the car already, they said, right? Because it was on top of the body.
Yes.
And so maybe that could potentially be used by a defense attorney in a court of law.
Yeah, to say, like, that jingled the radio loose.
You know, But yeah, and Grissom actually has, I think, a big follow up later on in this journal scene.
Okay.
I'll hold it.
Okay. And so the woman keeps talking, and I feel like this next part of her scene is A, well acted, but B, very honest, where she admits right from the get-go that she's not going to be a good witness.
Yeah.
That she thought she would be a good witness, which I think all of us think, like, yeah, I'm going to be, like, if it came down to it, like, I would be a good witness. So she's admitting, like, I always thought that I would be a good witness if, like, it came down to it. But in the moment, like, there was, too much happening and it was too fast and I couldn't focus. And I think that that's very honest and very telling.
Yeah, and I think it's a great scene. They talk about eyewitnesses' testimony a lot. Was it? I think, is it this episode or even last episode?
Yeah, Grissom does not like.
He's like that isn't like eyewitness testimony doesn't mean anything to me.
Yeah,
basically, which is fine, but we all have that idea like in our heads, and it can be really hard. And there's a lot of feelings and emotions going through this woman's head in that scene, like in that moment. And so I think it's cool to have that human element of like, yeah, I always thought I'd be a good eyewitness, and I'm sorry, it's like she's apologetic and
yeah
and stuff. I was like, that's a really cool scene as well.
Yeah, I agree. So we go to the bikers. This is where we learn, even though I think you were probably supposed to get it from the first scene, but this is reiterating that this is probably a racially motivated crime because they're
We're heroes, man.
They have no respect for our laws.
Exactly. Who? They're the damn cabbie.
Why? Because he's not from Vegas?
No, because she's not from here, this country.
Oh, and you know that because you saw his birth
We
certificate.
didn't exactly need to see it.
very much focused on the fact that the taxi driver was quote unquote not from this country.
Yeah,
And
a lot of, obtuse wording.
yes. And they end up taking like DNA samples from them after Jim Brass basically threatens them because they're like, oh, I don't have to do this. This isn't like, you can't force me. And Jim Brass is like, technically, no. But I could bring you all down to the station and like hold you on open warrants.
Yeah.
So do you want to just voluntarily give your DNA? And then they all agree to voluntarily give their DNA.
So this is where I think Grissom makes a big mistake because they are basically admitting to what they are doing.
Yes.
And Grissom,
yeah, they're saying they're heroes. They're like, you should be thanking us. Like, we're heroes. Like, we stepped up and we stopped him from getting away. And
all of a sudden Grissom is like, yep, now I'm going to need you all to swab and take your photo. And I think that puts these guys on a back foot. But like, really, he should have been quiet, and Brass should have been like taking official statements from them. So you ran over to the car. Who pulled him from the car? Which one of you did this? Right? Yeah. It's like, that's really the police work that should have been happening here. They kind of don't want to do that so they can have a scene later on the episode. Yeah. But I think that is, you would imagine the supervisor for CSI would know better than, and that somebody like Jim Brass would be ahead of that. So this is maybe my biggest evidence pet peeve in the whole episode.
Yeah, I am.
Where I think it's very story driven, but other than that, it's generally a pretty good episode.
That's very fair. And we then go to Grissom at the hospital. We learn that the victim, Rajib, is in critical condition, but his clothes are bagged. So Grissom is going to take those for processing. And sadly, it seems like his last words, sorry, spoiler alert, he doesn't make it, are going to be that he thinks that he killed the victim.
I mean, in some ways he did, but
he sped it up, but we'll get there.
Rajib is not the hero that he's pretended to be later on.
Yeah, hero's a stretch.
He's doing the right thing.
Yes, he is definitely doing the right thing.
He also took his eyes off the road.
Right.
In a different set of circumstances, he could have hit a drunk guy who was in a similar situation.
Who
was not otherwise not going to make it.
Yeah, this is very true. So we're then with Grissom with Greg Sanders in DNA, and maybe because like Greg Sanders had a bit of a heart-to-heart with Grissom about how he intimidates him, Grissom is letting him know that like this is his DNA lab and Greg is the master here. So like you do what you need to do, which then also means that Grissom's evidence gets processed before anybody else's. So
we got to give Grissom credit here. He's being an insightful, manipulative human, which is not his MO.
It's not his MO.
Which means he's thinking about the way that people feel.
Yes.
Greg, he's stressed. He's at the end of his rope. He's having a hard time. and he's just supporting him as a friend. And he knows that, and because he's a smart, logical person, he knows that the consequences that is going to be in his favor, at least not going to hurt him.
Yep.
And he goes forward and do it. Where, old Grissom would have been like, well, I'm the boss on this shift, so stop doing all that and do my stuff, right?
Yes, right. Yep.
So, yeah, I think Greg is great. I also want to know, is there not a day shift DNA guy who should be doing Eckley's DNA work?
I know, because Eckley's day guy.
Yeah, like we never see a day DNA guy doing Grissom stuff. If it's like
Eckley is day shift.
Yeah, so I was like, but I think there's just like he's the only other name we could throw out here.
Yeah, I think so.
We get a Warwick name drop
We do
here
get a
for Chase, which I thought we weren't going to see him.
I mean,
and we do see him later, but we don't hear anything about this case.
No, this case
for a
does
while,
not.
I thought it was going to be the B storyline.
Nope, it is not. Instead, we follow Grissom. He is now with Doc Robbins. We learn that the body has no pedestrian fractures and no like bruising that is almost telltale of someone involved in like a hit and run or a hit, like a pedestrian incident. And this is where we realize that he wasn't hit, which Nick mentioned this very early on. Like we very purposely do not see him hit by the taxi because he wasn't hit by the taxi. He was run over by the taxi, but he was already laying flat on the ground when the taxi went over him. So the taxi didn't like hit him and then drive over him. He was already on the ground.
Yeah, or he was falling down. Maybe they don't really show any evidence one way or the other.
Yeah,
he has like a tire tread over him, presumably. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He was in the back of the car.
Yeah. But we learn that he was going to die anyway because he had been stabbed in the abdomen. And we don't currently have an ID on the victim, but missing persons called. There is a woman who reported her son missing. So pretty solid lead there. We're back on the scene. Sarah pulls up. So this is the first time in this episode that we have someone else, like from the main group, someone else other than Grissom being shown.
Yeah.
Like out of the CSIs, right?
Yeah.
So Sarah pulls up. She was at a seminar and Grissom's like, oh, well, blah, blah, blah. And he then very pointedly is like, I need you.
Yes.
So this is my point of like, they mention that Grissom goes on a date. They never bring it up again. But then there are several instances throughout the episode where he is being very like, well, all I need is you, Sarah. And like, well, I have you, Sarah. And I feel that's on purpose.
That's a little unfair, maybe, having seen the show before. I can't help but hear you and wonder what you might know could be about to happen or transpire over the course of the show. I will say there is a coyness. And I also think that Sarah, the way that the actress who plays Sarah responds to that, you're supposed to think that that's an important thing that Grissom said to her.
Yes.
Is that, and I need you. Because they've had this thing with tension like between them for a while. Like, I don't, you're not spoiling this notion that those two people are on some kind of trajectory.
Right.
I don't know what the resolution or timeliness of that's going to be. But there is for sure something there. And that's a great thing. So yeah, I mean, but that's why it's almost like more infuriating to me. We don't come back to this date.
The date. Yeah.
Because like, was it, I mean, how long has he been here? Did Sarah go to bed before she went to this symposium? You know what I mean? Like,
I'm not saying that the date's with Sarah.
Oh.
I just think that it's like, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it. I just think it's very pointed that he is on a date with somebody else.
Yeah.
But then spends the entire episode telling Sarah how much he needs her. That is the point I was trying to get.
I thought it was interesting that he was on a date one episode after Terry
was married. Good point.
So you've got maybe a little bit of both. Like you get Grissom has all these layers. Like I also half think. Actually, I'll tell you, if you asked me at the start of this who I thought he was on a date with, my only plausible guess would be the woman from the deaf school.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I can see where you would.
That would be my only, like, because there's no other there's no character, but then we don't meet a character during the episode anyways. So it's like, okay, we'll have to see if they come back to it in a later episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have a big giant thing on a date, question mark, box around it. And then at the end, like an arrow pointing back that says, how have we not come back to this?
Nope, we don't. Spoiler alert, audience. We don't. Instead, we go to Grissom Sarah tagging blood drops. They realize there's a directionality to them, so they follow this all the way to the park. And this is where that camera movement comes in, which is why I was like, oh, is this a first time director? We have this like speeding around corners camera work to bring us to shorten the actual journey from like where they are to the park and make it, you know, condensed, but to still take you on the journey from where they started to ending up at the park.
And there's some very good tension with that as they move along and the numbers get higher and higher. How far have they traveled? Like you said, they're asking yourself, you know, they're doing this. And like all of a sudden it's like, well, Grissom, I mean, Sarah found the trail of blood instantaneously upon arriving at the scene.
This is why you need Sarah, because she's evidently he was not capable of doing this.
Although I must admit he did have his camera out, so maybe he was taking pictures of the car or something.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, it good pacing, I think.
Yeah, I think so too.
Scene. That's like the first time I felt like, man, I'm just being drawn. I want to see what they're gonna find. At the end of this blood trail, like there's tension. There, it was really good.
I agree. So they get to this park and they opt to check out the basketball court because the victim is a teenager. So they're like, he's not going to be hanging out like at the playground part of the park. So they go to the basketball court.
Yeah, the jungle gym.
And they realize Sarah finds droplets of cast off. So she's like, hey, like this is our crime scene right here. But she also points out it's a very big dump site. So they're going to need some help. But before we get that help, we're with Doc Robbins with a woman. She IDs the victim as her son. He's only 14 years old. We later on learn his name is Todd, but her son's name is Todd. We then have our first appearance of Warwick.
Yes.
Warwick is with Sarah, and he is talking to her about her case. And this is where, if you hadn't picked it up already, the episode was like, hey, this is a racially motivated crime. Just in case you didn't get it already, we're going to use Warwick to like really, really drive it home.
It's a little bit of a token minority feeling.
Yeah, there is a little bit of that. I agree.
Where it's like, we need somebody with representation to make these statements, because if it's just a bunch of white people talking about racism, it's not fair. Yeah. And so but unfortunately, thankfully, regime is not going to make it. We need Warwick to step in.
Thankfully, even though he's not in this episode a ton, he does have more scenes in this.
So if this was his only scene,
that would be awful. I wouldn't be happy about that. But it's not. We do have other
valid
scenes.
Point.
Yep.
I wonder if there was a reshoot for that other Warwick scene, where someone was like, we cannot have this be his only scene. I know we put it in to get paid. That was supposed to be Nick's scene.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry, Nick, you're just not appearing in this episode now because we decided that had to be Warwick.
Yeah. I did tell Nick before we started recording that I very often in this episode, and listeners, if you've been listening, you know that I say this all the time. I say, well, I didn't research that. And this time I did. So spoiler alert, Nick makes no appearance in this episode. No. Zero appearance. And so I did actually research and found nothing. But the only thing I found in my research of why wasn't Nick in the CSI episode Bloodlust was that this is the first time that he is not in a CSI episode. So welcome to the first episode without Nick in it. But
like, look at his IMDb and he has like one less episode than Grissom or something. This will be the reason why.
Oh no, that's not going to be true.
Oh, geez.
Well, actually, to a degree. So
what do you mean? It's 335 episodes to 334 episodes. That's because Grissom is a executive producer, apparently.
I was going to say that can't be purely from him being an actor in it, but we'll get there.
I'm going to not click on the actor one because that's going to be too
spoiler. Don't click on the actor one. We're back with Jim Brass. He's with Miss Branson. She is very upset about why the taxi driver hasn't been arrested. And this is when Jim Brass has to let her know that actually the cause of her son's death was that he was stabbed. So he's trying to get any information from her. Was your son who he's hanging
Hanging
out
around with the
with? Was he in
wrong
any
crowd,
trouble? And she's very
playing
adamant that,
b-ball after
yeah,
school.
yeah, she's very adamant that he was a great kid, but she's been on the run from her ex-husband for many, many a years, and he has threatened to kill
This
her,
story
and
is brutal.
he's threatened to kill her and her two sons on multiple occasions. So she is definitely thinking that the ex-husband has something to do with this. We return to Sarah and Grissom at the park. Sarah is working with the scent dogs. Grissom has a metal detector. As Grissom is metal detectoring, he finds a gun and thankfully has Sarah collect the gun because she's wearing gloves and he is not. So
Yep.
thank you for proper protocol there, Grissom. And then the dogs start barking, which I will say my dog Gabby also started barking. She heard them barking and then she was like, I'm going to bark too. And the dogs found another dead body.
I know. I
So
thought it was
now
going
we're
to
up
be the
to
knife.
no, it's not the knife. Now we're up to dead body count number 2.
Yep.
So,
which, spoiler, we never find this knife.
no, we never do.
I mean, they even go so far as to say they never find the knife later.
Yeah.
But then I was like, when I heard that the first time watching it, I was like, okay, they're about to find the knife.
Nope.
But that's not at all.
That's not at all what happens. Instead, we have Sarah processing Todd's jacket. This is the one scene we have with Catherine. Catherine enters. She is about to take Lindsay and her friends out for Lindsay's birthday, so
Allegedly.
she can't be, working cases. But we learn that Sarah is testing Todd's jacket for gunshot residue. It tests positive. She then quickly finds Grissom in the lab because he has started working on the gun without her, and she's not happy about that.
Yeah, there's a lot of history there starting the evidence, but I've been paying attention to this. They all do this to each other.
Oh yeah, they all do
Grissom
this to each other.
they use this unduly, unfairly against Grissom.
Yeah, he gets called out a lot, but they all tend to get evidence and then run with evidence.
Normally you just hear oh yeah, I ran the thing on this and this is what I found. Oh, okay. That that's new information to me.
Yeah.
And they don't they'll freak out about it.
Yeah.
But yeah. But it's been a thing with Grissom and it's kind of weird, but I get why the point is Sarah wants to be included. Grissom is including her, which is important because he's been batting 1,000 this episode. And this is really the first misstep.
True. This is true. They realize as they're examining the gun that there is what appears to be burnt skin on the cylinder. And this prompts Sarah to talk about doing DNA recovery on sweat from the gun. And she's referencing a new paper that's come out on the, probably the percentage probability of, DNA recovery from different surfaces and such. And she's asking Grissom, do you want a copy of the paper? And he's like, nope, because I have you.
I don't need the paper. I have you.
The paper.
I feel like she doesn't know how to take this.
But they very much stay on her face after he says this, and she has a very you can kind of see that she's trying to process what he
it's
says.
not clear what he's trying to get at.
But we're back with Doc Robbins and the newly discovered dead body, and we realize that neither Todd or this dead body have burn marks on their hand because they're suspecting that the shooter would have a burn mark on their palm from holding their hand over the top of the gun as they were firing it.
Style firing their gun.
Yes. But this victim does have an incised wound on his palm, which is very common when you are stabbing someone because the knife can slip and then slice your own palm.
They do a very bad reenactment scene here where he does not cut himself at all in the scene. I was like, wait, is he pinching himself with this butterfly knife? Is that what they're saying? But no, they're saying, yeah, you stab and then you're pulling, your hand slides over the blade and you cut yourself.
Yeah. Because, people bleed and then things get slippery and it gets very difficult to hold on to.
Bounce back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doc Robbins is trying to figure out how to remove.
That's the name of our episode, by the way. People are spongy.
People are spongy. I mean, we've had that. That's a solid one. Doc Robbins is trying to figure out how to remove the bullet, and because it's fragmented, the jacket is fragmented. So he's trying to figure that out.
Really into it.
Yes. We also realize that the victim's shoulder is dislocated, which plays a very important role a little while later. David enters.
Again.
The taxi driver. Yes, we have a quick little David. He comes in, he enters, and this is where we learn that the taxi driver Rajiv didn't make it. So David has to go to the hospital to collect him because he is now a third victim. We then pan to a boy playing basketball. Jim Brass walks up. We learn that his mother is not home. We are to assume that his mother is Miss Branson. His name is Eric, though. He thinks his dad's dead.
Yeah, well.
He very matter-of-factly is like, no, I'm not going to see my dad. My dad's been dead since I was 2. Like, why would I see my dad? Which perks up Jim Brass's detective skills.
I also want to say, I rewatched this scene probably 5 times.
Oh, wow, okay.
Spoiler alert, later on in this episode, there is a form of physical evidence on this child that should be visible in this scene. And I don't have a 4K stream or there's no remastered version of this available to me, but I would bet money that when this scene was filmed, the makeup department did not put the evidence into place. They do a good job of not focusing on it.
Right.
But I was kind of like, wait, wouldn't Brass have noticed something like this?
Yeah.
I also wonder if his mom would have noticed something like this, you know?
Well,
but she has a lot going on right now.
She has a lot going on.
I gotta give her a little bit of a pass.
Yeah. We're then with ballistics with the frangible bullet. They're able to match it to the revolver. Sarah enters. We learn that the gun is registered to a Jonathan Rourke. Jim Brass is then with Miss Branson. We learn that Jonathan/John is actually her ex-husband. She admits that she had told her sons that John was killed. She just said that it was easier than, admitting the truth to them.
Do you think it's a little weird that she told Jim Brass about her ex-husband earlier on, and then he never looked him up?
Yes.
That was like, I didn't catch this the first time.
Very good point. I didn't catch it either.
When I watched it the second time, I was like, wait, what?
You're like, wait, what is that?
Why did he not know who this person was?
Yeah, he definitely should have looked him up already, because she had, at this point, already said that her ex-husband had threatened to kill her and her children. So he should be looking up.
Major suspect.
Yeah. But for storyline purposes, it wouldn't be as exciting. So
also, a real WTF moment is about to.
Yeah.
I was like, oh crap.
So then they're like, hey, we found a dead body in the park. It's like a 30-year-old dude. Do you want to take a look? Because they're thinking maybe it's ex-husband.
Ex-husband, yeah.
So she's like, sure. And she doesn't say it that enthusiastically. She takes a look at a picture of the dead body. Womp womp. It's not her ex-husband. It's her current boyfriend, Stuart Bradley.
Yeah. Current boyfriend is good. It's a bit of a stretch. I imagine that she's had to break up with him already.
I think.
And now he's dead, so now he's definitely not her current
I think the idea is that he was going to move with them.
Oh, really? I didn't get that.
I think so. We go to Sarah at the park at night. She finds drag marks. We stay. Is this a scene that you were like, why is she at the park at night?
She just go there by herself. Like,
yeah.
She did not tell Grissom she was going. I was like, this is what she's doing on her off hours. Yeah. So remember her whole not having a life thing?
Yes.
And then I was like, wait, I forget she works at night.
They're the night shift.
This is probably during her shift.
Yep. We stay with Sarah. She's using a pink marker on a map. Grissom enters. She has marked out, where the drag marks are, where the body was found. But she notes that alongside the drag marks, there is no blood. So Todd was not the one doing the dragging, because he would have been bleeding. Like, there would have been blood accompanied with it. There's no blood. So
or over the body.
Yeah.
Extra blood, probably.
So this leads them to think, okay, maybe there was someone else there. And then also, maybe Todd wasn't the shooter. Maybe he has GSR on him because he was in the vicinity of the shooter, but he was not actually the shooter himself.
Yeah.
We then have Jim Brass with the ex-husband, John. I was almost going to say that this should be the title of our episode, just because it's so weird. And maybe you understand this line and I'm just not getting it. But he's telling John, like, oh, I thought you were going to be some type of monster, the way that your ex-wife described you. And then he goes, "You're more like Gumby."
Yeah,
I don't
was that 'cause
understand
he
what
was
he means by
bald
that. I
or
don't know.
something?
I don't know.
I didn't. I had the same reaction. I was like, "What is
Okay.
this?"
I was like, what am I missing here? I don't understand, Jim Brass. But they're letting him know, like, hey, your gun was used in the commission of the crime of your ex-wife's current boyfriend.
Yeah.
And this is where he's
Importantly,
like, oh,
his reaction when is really good when Jim Brass is like
oh, that
basically
his
telling him his son is dead.
dead. Yep.
Which he goes on talks about how he hasn't seen him, but like you could tell it shook him, right?
Yes.
It was a really good act. Like you really could have underacted that moment. So he did a great job.
I agree.
That's all right. I think earlier I said there's a lot of like randomly great acting in this episode, and this is one of them. Like,
yeah. No, I agree entirely. So he learns that his gun was used in the commission of one of the crimes that they're investigating. He says that the gun was stolen, but then he also admits that but he provides receipts that he was in Teos, New Mexico at the time of the two crimes. And so Grissom enters, though.
I love we're still in this period of like guys with the fat wallet and
just pulling out every receipt that they shoved in there. Okay. Instead of pulling up their smartphone and pulling up their email and being like, I got the hotel receipt emailed to me, so like let me pull it up for you.
I've almost never held on to a receipt in my life.
I've generally speaking, the only time I hold on to receipts now are if I have to expense it for work.
Yep. Yeah.
Or if it's something
major.
Yeah, and if it breaks, I want to be able to take it back to the place and be like, hey, this broke and I paid $600 for this, so you're gonna replace it for me.
Grissom car repairs.
Yeah, stuff like that. Grissom enters. He wants to see his hands. Hands are clean though. He doesn't have. There's no burn marks on the hands.
Just going around the whole city checking people's palms.
Yep. Grissom then walks into a room where Warwick and Sarah are. He asks Warwick what he weighs, and fairly Warwick is like, you don't pay me enough for that. Like, why am I going to tell you this? And then he's like, well, lie on the floor. And he's like, what? I like that he's like,
does answer eventually that he weighs 195, give or take a donut.
Yes. And then he does, after Grissom says please, agrees to lie down on the ground. He asks Sarah to drag him, so Sarah drags him. Then Grissom goes to Judy and asks her to help out. And this is a fantastic callback. She was like, no, I know what you did to Xander's feet.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not
callback.
I'm not helping you. And he's like, you get to keep your shoes on. Like, don't worry about it. You don't have to take your shoes off. So
I dropped the ball in that callback.
It was such a good callback.
And I knew it was a callback. I wasn't thinking about the callback.
Yeah. So Judy drags Warwick, and
Judy was in an earlier episode. I was like, I don't remember Judy at all.
I don't remember Judy either, so don't feel bad about it. Then Sarah and Grissom are talking about this experiment, and the idea is that because Sarah is a little bit larger than Judy, she's able to just like in a straight line drag Warwick back. But
she had the leverage and the momentum or body weight to just keep going.
But Jody, being smaller and probably not having the same upper body strength, had to kind of keep like dropping him and then like picking him back up again to drag him, which is a theory as to why
maybe
the dislocated shoulder was dislocated.
Maybe this is a good time for some science with Nick. We'll keep it brief, but like angle, right, is going to be important in terms of the amount of resistance you have to overcome, the energy you're going to have to put into, and like the perceived weight. If you've ever used a lever or any sort of force multiplier, like these little things, they're really important. They add up in terms of the actual effort you have to put into something.
Yes.
So there's a combination of both Judy's stature for her height, her physical strength, as well as the sort of physical difference in the angle. And because she can't keep him held up off the ground, more of his body's going to drag on the ground, more friction.
Yeah.
So she's going to basically tire out and have to do it in little spurts.
Yeah. This leads them to think maybe Jan Branson was involved because she's like about the same size as Judy.
She does not come off as short to me.
She does not come off as short to me either.
Scene.
No, I agree. I entirely agree. So we go to Jan Branson packing her car to leave. Eric is seated in there. They ask to see her hands. Her hands are clean. But then they go over to Eric, and Grissom is like, hey, buddy, gotta see those hands. And whoops-a-daisicles, he has a burn mark on his palm.
Pretty big one.
Pretty big one.
I don't know how Jim Brass missed it.
Yeah. This transitions us to Grissom and Jim Brass with Jan, Eric, and an advocate. Initially, he's saying he burned it on an iron. Like, that's where the burn mark on his...
Yeah.
And I was like, kiddo, you're not, like, straight ironing your hair. And I doubt that you're, like, ironing your shirts. So, like, where are you going to burn your hand on an iron? Like, under what circumstances are you going to be burning your hand on an iron?
Kids over here Cinderellaing it.
Yeah, like, what's happening here? So, when that gets quickly dismissed, he tells a story of how he followed Todd to the park. And Todd was confronting the boyfriend about, not wanting to have to move again. And this is where I think the boyfriend was moving with them, because the threat that Todd and then ultimately Eric was making to the boyfriend was turn down the promotion so we don't have to move. So my thought was like, the reasoning that their mom gave them this time for the move was that the boyfriend got a promotion, and that meant that they had to like move to a new city for his promotion.
You're right, because I read that as the fake reason, but I didn't take the logical step that like, well, then he must be going with them, or they'd be like, why did we move to Tucson for Todd's promotion
and have him stay there
back in Vegas?
Right. Yeah.
That would be hilariously silly. So yeah, I think you are 100% correct.
Okay, I was like, that's
that makes a lot of sense. I just kind of like missed it.
Yeah, but Sarah bursts this bubble. She walks in and is explaining how the DNA collected on the gun is a familiar match to Todd.
Great callback to her bringing
paper.
This
Yep.
paper
17% chance, and it fell within that 17% chance zone. And so we get the real story in that Todd
flashback. Do you think he's admitting to the crime here?
I don't know, but we as the audience get the real story.
Yeah.
In which Todd actually went to the park to stop Eric.
Yeah.
And then Eric shoots Bradley, and then like in the scuffle, Bradley ends up stabbing Todd, and Eric tells Todd to go home and he'll clean up the body, and then we obviously get the scene with the taxi driver.
I bring this up. There's going to be a conversation about what's going to happen to Eric, but any prosecutor or any defense attorney worth their salt is going to get Eric off. I'm convinced
they would get him, maybe not off entirely, but they would probably get him for manslaughter.
I feel like all they can say is that he touched the gun. But we know he touched the gun because he fought with his brother over the gun in his story.
But he burned his hand on the gun.
Yeah, I know. But
the gun
went
he had
off,
to be holding. Well, that's why I'm saying maybe he'd get manslaughter. Is that because they don't even clarify this. I think they leave this ambiguous, which I like. Even in like the retelling, it's not necessarily that he like purposely was like, but like there was like a bit of a struggle, and then the gun went off.
Yeah. Well, when the retelling, like the gun goes off and shoots him in the kneecap.
Yes.
And then in the retelling, he like kills him like executioner style, staring him down.
Does he? For some reason, I'm like, I don't remember that.
And so like that's why I was like, if he said that, he's screwed. Yes. But if he didn't actually say that, then I think a good defense attorney will be like, the evidence is just so ambiguous. Plus, he's a little kid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The jury's just, there's going to be someone in that jury who does not want to convict this little kid. And so, but it's important that, so mom is about to ask what happens to him. They did a great job phrasing it if he's convicted of murder.
If. So
we don't know what's going to happen. We'll never find out.
We will never find out. Instead, we learn that he got the revolver from Jan. Like she had taken it from her ex-husband. But she didn't know it was missing until this morning. And we also learn that the reason that Stuart carried a knife was because he was afraid of John.
Yeah, because
like Jan had told him about John, and he, understandably had a concern that John was going to come after him, and so he started carrying a knife, and that's why he had a knife on him.
And he was a little quick to stab these kids. But
I agree.
I mean, you feel for your life, you feel for your life, do whatever you
Yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
it's hard. I mean, he's dead, so I guess I don't have to judge him anyways.
Yeah.
But, I guess it was warranted.
So that's the end of that.
I thought the
I don't want
episode
to say
was
storyline because
forgot
they're connected, but of that crime.
I actually
Crimes it.
thought we were about to go to credits when the scene was ending. And
This-
then I looked and I went, oh, there's like 8 minutes left.
To be fair, the first watch through or rewatch through of this for me, same thing. And I was like, and then I was like, wait a second. Like there's technically another victim here. So we go to Greg Sanders in the lab. Grissom enters. I guess Greg Sanders has been paging him 10 times. And Greg Sanders, and he has been paging him so many times because he wants to reveal his match game board. So he takes a sheet off of the board and basically shows, via DNA testing, which of the bikers he can connect via epithelials to the victim. But he can only connect 6 out of the 12 with DNA evidence, right?
Yeah.
So fair. We then have a scene with Grissom back at the crime scene, and we see the entire crime happen again.
Yep.
We see the bikers. We see Todd stumbling out. We see the taxi. We see him being pulled. The taxi driver being pulled. Rajiv being pulled from the taxi, and so we see the entire thing kind of overlaid over the current scene as it is today. And so
the shadow.
Yeah, almost like a hologram. You're seeing a hologram. Yeah. We then have Grissom with Jim Brass. They're talking about mob mentality because obviously that's what happened in this instance. And Grissom has to admit that, forensics can't solve everything. And sometimes forensics, fall short. And he's telling Jim Brass, hey, it's up to you guys now. We did everything we could from a forensic standpoint here, but now it's up to you to get the convictions. So Jim Brass takes this seriously. He's in interrogation with Mr. Cooper and Mr. Cooper's lawyer. And Mr. Cooper is being charged with first-degree murder because he didn't know this until this point. Rajiv is dead.
I will say, I actually, for a second, I was like, oh, I recognize this lawyer.
Yeah, she is the lawyer in.
She's been in a bunch of episodes.
Yeah, she's the default lawyer in half the episodes. And
she hasn't been in an episode for a while though. That's I think why.
That is true. It has been a while since she's been in an episode.
So I was like, oh, right. I remember this person.
So they're letting him know that via DNA they can connect him, and he's one of the main people. And the lawyer immediately is like, "Is the DA willing to deal? Is there anything we can do to lessen the charge or get some leniency here?"
There was a weird weird dialogue exchange where I thought she was referring to herself as the DA at first. It's like DA willing to deal. She was referring to herself as we're willing to cut a deal. And I was like, oh no, she's asking.
She's asking
if the DA will cut a deal.
Yes. Yes. And Jim Brass seems to think so because he wants his buddies. So essentially, you talk and you give me your testimony about everybody who was involved, and we'll cut you a deal specifically.
You'll get out around the same time as Eric.
Yep.
10, 15 years from now.
Yep. And that is the end of today's episode. So Nick, what did you think about today's episode?
I've certainly said some great things. I'll cut to the chase. I was stuck to this episode the first time I watched it.
Okay.
And I tend not to settle on a score until I get a rewatch in.
Fair.
I will say I was almost itching. There were a couple days between when I watched the episode the first time and the second time. I was almost itching to watch it earlier. And I think that was that's a testament to how good my first perception of the episode was.
Mm-hmm.
It really isn't the greatest rewatch. Not bad by any stretch of the imagination.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't comparably as great as the first.
Yep.
And so I was hemming and hawing with the score. And so I settled on a 4.
Okay.
And I think that I definitely would give it a rewatch, even though I said it's not the greatest rewatch.
Yeah.
I would give it a rewatch, and 4 out of 5.
Okay.
I thought I'd hit a 4. I even considered if 5 was on the table after the first watch.
Ooh, all right. Look at that. I'm going to give it a 3.5. And I think mostly because in some ways it was nice that this was a Grissom Sarah episode. Like, in some ways, that's nice. But I'm a big fan of everyone being involved and everyone, like, playing a part and, like, a more equal distribution of the storyline across the CSIs. And we
You make it
obviously,
sound
like,
like there's a lot of Grissom Sarah episodes coming up.
yeah, but we got,
This is my first.
we got no Nick, like absolutely no Nick. Yep. We got one tiny scene with Catherine, and then we got like a few short scenes with Warwick, and which I apologize, in the last episode, in the beginning of this one, I called him Warwick because there's a town near me called Warwick, and my brain keeps like auto-correcting his name as I'm saying it, and I have to be like, no, he's Warwick, like not Warwick.
I tend to pronounce Warwick, Rhode Island as Warwick.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah, so you're like, it's fine. Not a problem
So
for me.
I kind of like understand what you mean when you say it.
Yeah. So, but I think it's, especially the first time watching it, I think it, as you were saying, it keeps you engaged, it keeps you vested, it keeps you like, hey, what's going to happen next? I feel that it moves at a good pace. It doesn't, one of the failings I think of the last episode or the previous episode was that there was like random talking that didn't like really feel like it went anywhere. And it was just like, oh, you're just like filling dead air with like random talking. And I feel like basically all the dialogue here was good, solid dialogue that moved the story along.
Yeah.
There wasn't just like meh filler random, like everything kept everything moving.
Even Greg's game show match game wasn't this like over. You didn't put on a funny hat or
right.
You just had like a red string board to map it out.
Right.
Normal evidence board.
Yes. So 3.5, probably a rewatch because I do think that there's certain things that you don't appreciate on the first watch that you can appreciate on the second. Mainly that first scene that you talked about, right? Like when you rewatch that, you're like, oh, right, they didn't show the taxi actually hitting him. And like those little things that you're probably not going to notice the first time you watch this episode, you can better appreciate on the second watch through. So yeah, 3.5. Pretty solid episode. Probably like one of my higher ratings in a while. I feel like I've been hovering at like 2.5 for a while. So this is actually like higher up in the ratings. And
that'd be at least as high as my highest rating this season.
Probably. Yeah, I feel
I gave Fight Night a 4. That was pretty good.
Oh, I was going to say, I gave like a 3.5 or a 4 to Fight Night as well. I'd have to go double check, but I think around the same.
I think that's might be the best one so far this season.
But we'll see what our scores are for our next episode when we return to review season 3, episode 10, High and Low. In the meantime, you can support us on Patreon by going to patreon.com and searching for Who Are You, a CSI podcast. You can also find us on Facebook the same way. You can also find us on Twitter/X, Instagram at Who Are You CSI Pod, or check out our website, whoareyoucsipod.com. But otherwise, we'll talk to you next week.
No spoilers.
No spoilers.